might be a factor, the fact that right now, at the end of September, early October, that the team up north, the Ducks, are doing a better job on defense cohesively, not having the breakdowns, not having the explosive USC's having, really containing it. But if you look at that first half, imagine if that first half USC put in was at Autzen, or was it the Coliseum, and they're on the road, raucous crowd in Southern California, Colley's bouncing, going crazy. Do you think that the fact that they had fans leaving in the first half that came back into the stadium and got behind this team in the second half, have them rally? I mean, do you think they made that comeback in the Coliseum? Maybe, but odds are it's hard to win on the road in professional sports. Winning on the road in college with college athletes is a whole nother story.
My obvious rebuttal to that statement is, without looking at the schedule, just based on recollection, is who did they play at home versus who did they play on the road and in a neutral site. Tulane, both Utah games, UCLA with DTR, that was a high-scoring game. So right out of the gate, there's 4 road and neutral site games against difficult opponents.
Yeah. Great point. We kind of briefly mentioned Oregon and how Oregon's defense is doing better. And hey, like, there are some Duck fans in the chat, and there's no doubt that Oregon's defense is performing a lot better than USC's to this point. But just as I said that USC hasn't played anybody, and Colorado finally represented a notch up, like, let's not go overboard. Okay, you shut down Stanford, all right? USC shut down Stanford. Like, my grandmother could shut down Stanford, all right? Like, let's not put too much weight on whom Oregon has played. Now, Oregon, dismantled Colorado, whereas USC allowed Colorado to hang in. But, of course, Oregon had that in Autzen. USC had it on the road in Boulder. And it was really fascinating to see on Saturday that a lot of Pac-12 reporters, pundits like John Canzano, the Portland-based columnist, he tweeted out either after the USC-Colorado game or right when the game was ending. He said, I'm thinking the Pac-12 championship game is going to have 2 teams from the Pacific Northwest. And I'm not here to disagree with that, because right now that's kind of my inclination. Like, if you were just to say right now, not a week from now, not a month from now, but right now, you'd probably lean in that direction. So I'm not even disagreeing with Canzano. But Oregon played a miserable first half against Stanford. Washington played a below-average game in Tucson against Arizona. So, and here's the thing. The USC game, big noon Saturday, all the media, all the celebrities, the huge spotlight. So everyone was talking about USC. Oregon and Washington, those poor, subpar performances were on Pac-12 Network. And very few people were talking about those games in terms of the national narrative out of the Pac-12 from the weekend. So, USC had, its shaky game, but Oregon was shaky for a half before it put it together in the second half against Stanford. And Washington played a shaky 60 minutes against Arizona. So, in the early afternoon, you would certainly say, oh, yeah, Pac-12 championship game is going to be an all Pacific Northwest affair. But then if you stuck it out through the full day, and then you looked at how Oregon played, and then you looked at how Washington played, you know what? It's not as though you have Washington and Oregon up here and USC way down there. Those 3 teams are pretty much on the same plane, and we're going to see them play each other in the next month and a half. Oregon and Washington, of course, they both made it to October 14th unbeaten. But there's not a significant.
Well, I'll jump in and one of those people that Matt was talking about, again, a great fan is Mikey G. So, Mikey, we're not saying that's 35, but let me add a layer to this, right? Do you think Shedeur Sanders, who's basically the engine on this train, this Colorado train, do you think he's ever seen a stadium like Autzen on that day? And so to get down early, it spirals, So being on the road or being home, if this was even, I'll give it to you. If this is the Rose Bowl and there's 25,000 people and they're all sitting on their hands, that's not much of a home environment. but at Autzen, at Seattle, right, at Reeser, in Salt Lake City, these places for a young quarterback, and he's not young, he's a junior, but he's never played. This has been his big jump up to Division I football, seeing these stadiums. Yeah, these things can get away from players. It can, the environment, the moment can get too big for these. They're young men, and this was the first time he was in that kind of an environment. So, am I saying it's worth 35 points? No, but it's probably worth a hell of a lot of points, I would say, in the big grand scheme of things. So, I wouldn't say it's a 35-point advantage, but there is a narrative to everything. It's not specifically 35 points, but it is hard for a guy, first road game like that ever, outclassed, but it can get away from them. And I think that's what happened. Being at home, they were able to rally and bring it back because USC was going down that road. And then you got to, at some point, you guys also, if you watch that game in Colorado, it wasn't like there were wide open touchdowns in the end zone. There was some Colorado guys were making some plays out there. And remember this name, Miller. Maybe he's a one-hit wonder. He's a freshman, 6'2", came in, but he lit it up for 196. Remember that name. He's unknown now, but let's see where he is a year from now or 2 years from now. This guy might be someone we're talking about for the NFL because, as porous as USC defense can be at times, that guy was making plays out there. And so at some point you'd say, hey, look, this team was way down. They rally at home. They had USC gave them lots of opportunities, but they took advantage of those opportunities and they made plays.
For a player who made his first career reception in the second half of that game and wound up with almost 200 yards receiving, that's crazy.
That was mine.
One real quick note: Tim let out the words 9 a.m. not to make an excuse for USC. Because the body clock is almost the same. We're only working with an hour's difference there. But at the same time, it is an hour's difference. Plus, Colorado had already been through that big noon
a couple times.
Atmosphere, had already done it twice, once at home, once on the road. So they already had to get up for games against TCU and against Nebraska twice. So they'd had that routine down, and that was the third time that they had gone through that early routine.
But you know what? Like USC was ready for the start of the game. It was when we got into lunchtime that USC began to get a food coma, so to speak. I just want to hit on a few other things. The Colorado-Oregon game was the first game in which Colorado knew it would not have Travis Hunter on both sides of the ball. So the first game in which Colorado took the field knowing it wouldn't have Travis Hunter, very hard situation. So Colorado had a chance to adjust a little bit more without Travis Hunter for the USC game. And then, of course, the other thing is after you get beaten like a drum, chances are next week you're going to play better, just laws of averages. So, like, if we had USC at Colorado in week 4 and then you had Colorado at Oregon in week 5, like, does anybody think, like, the results were going to play out exactly the same way that they did? I don't think so. So, like, those two things definitely have to be factored into this. And also in terms of comparing USC, Oregon, and Washington right now, Oregon's close shave against Texas Tech looks worse, right? Texas Tech lost to West Virginia, struggled with Houston. So like that result is actually tanking instead of improving. And of course, Washington's win over Michigan State, that looks worse as the Spartans continue to struggle in the Big Ten. Of course, a good reminder to listen to Mark Rogers' Big Ten Paradigm podcast each week for more quality Big Ten coverage. So it's not as though Washington's opponents to date are looking better. They're actually looking worse. Like Boise State's been struggling as well. So that result doesn't look as good. So like, right now, right now, if you ask me, is USC going to beat Oregon, Duck fans? I'm going to say no. All right. So like, I'm not saying like USC's better. What I am saying is there's not this chasm between USC here and Oregon and Washington there. And that was kind of the undercurrent of the national media reaction. You don't have to agree with it, but that was the undercurrent of the national media reaction after Big Noon Saturday that, it's definitely Washington and Oregon up here and little old USC down here. But then Oregon with a mediocre game, Washington with a very mediocre game. And so I don't think that the difference among these three teams is nearly as big as a lot of the national narrative seems to be portraying it. And here's the other positive spin for USC. And I'm usually the bad cop. Tim Prangley's the good cop when we do our shows, but I'm going to do a little good cop here. The other positive spin for USC is that when you look at how Notre Dame and Utah are on offense, those are two train wrecks on offense. Like, I'm liking those matchups more for USC right now. I'm not saying like those games are going to be easy. I am saying that those matchups are looking better than they did a few weeks ago. And so if we just go by the hypothesis that USC has very manageable matchups against Notre Dame and Utah because those offenses are struggling so much to score and they're not likely to expose the Alex Grinch defense to the extent that those two teams need to do, then USC is going to be 9-0 heading into the Washington game in November. So while a lot of things about this Alex Grinch defense need to be fixed urgently, we could take the view, like you can make a reasonable claim that USC has 5 weeks, not 2, not 3, 5 weeks to be ready for that Washington game. And in 5 weeks, a coaching staff, even one which is struggling as much as this one, can fix a few things on defense. If USC can, improve this defense enough in 5 weeks' time, the season can still be saved, and the Trojans can at least split that Washington-Oregon double stack, which is what they will need most likely to get to Vegas for the Pac-12 championship game.
I'm trying to find the chat. Actually, you guys want to hit the super chat real quick, and then I've a comment from an Oklahoma fan we can address in a second. But Mark, you want to get this one? Absolutely,
we will here. I will say that Notre Dame, for all the excitement Notre Dame fans have about Marcus Freeman taking over the program, and I'm sure things will continue to evolve there, their offense is a carbon copy of a Brian Kelly offense. They have a tremendous offensive line. They have a tremendous back in Audric Estime and some other really good ones, Logan Diggs and others. They have a great tight end in Evans. He's like a Michael Mayer clone. He's the next guy. But I don't know where their downfield receivers are. I know they've had some injuries, but they have nothing to threaten a defense downfield.